Hi, Wanderers.
Welcome to Wanderlost.
I'm Ron.
And I'm Amanda.
And this is Military Chatter. And today we're gonna
share stories.
So we've been talking about Space A travel with, or travel in the military, and the last episode was Space A. And we kind of hinted at some stories.
Right.
Because we have traveled Space A quite a bit. And as we said, you have to be patient. Sometimes there's a little bit of luck involved.
Right.
And sometimes you have very, very narrow successes and some near misses.
And some absolute failures. So,
yes.
Go ahead. How about you start?
All right, so I guess I'll talk about the time I very nearly got stranded in Germany.
Okay.
So we used to, when we lived in Turkey, we would take the Space A flight up to Germany, and then we would catch flights back to the States. We flew into Dover, we've flown into Baltimore, but our favorite was to catch a medevac flight that went from Ramstein to
Germany.
Ramstein, Germany, to the East Coast, and then to Jackson, Mississippi,
Right.
which was about 4 hours from home.
And it would stop at Andrews Air Force Base. And we would normally just like sit there or possibly get off the plane and then right back on it. And we were always the only ones that got back on it. And one time we had to get off the plane because Air Force One was landing. And then they were like, do you guys want to come watch like the deplaning? And it was pretty cool the way everything was organized and how everybody walked like in step. Like there was a person who was exactly the same height as the president, and his job was to just like literally walk like right beside him.
Yeah.
And there was no part of the president that you could see. And then they got on a helicopter, I don't even know which one, and 2 helicopters took off and flew so that you didn't know which helicopter.
He did wave when he came out
He sure
the door.
did. But that was just cool in general to see like how all that's orchestrated and all that works. And we just happened to be sitting there in the terminal, and they just made the announcement. They're like, if anybody wants to come see Air Force One land, and we were like, yes, we do. So we did.
So this was not on that flight because I was going back, trying to get back to Turkey. I think it was the last time I was going back before we PCS'd. So we were over in the States. It dropped you guys off. You guys were going to stay, and I was going to go back and finish the move and meet you guys in Maryland. So I caught the flight, and I think it was out of Jackson over into Germany. So flying on a C-17, again, it's a Cadillac of Space A. But I knew it was a very narrow window for me to land, get through customs into Germany, and then make roll call for the next flight. I think we didn't really talk about that in the Space A thing, but you have to be there when roll call starts, which usually is a couple of hours before the
Well,
thing.
it's better to be there as soon as possible because, again, it matters whose name gets on the list first.
Yeah.
So as soon as they open roll call, you need to be there to get your name on
Say, hey,
in line.
I'm signed in.
A lot of times you have to stand around in line, and so it's kind of like buying tickets to a concert. Whoever gets there earliest gets to stand at the front of the line.
So I knew that my landing at Germany, and even to just not to be there when roll call started, but to even make it within roll call, because roll call also cuts off at a point so they can start assigning seats.
Yeah, and also even if you're on the list and they go down, we talked about the categories last time, and they call your category and you're not there, they skip right over you and go to the next category.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter if you're coming a little bit later, you've already lost that seat.
So, without digressing too much into that, on the C-17, I know it's going to be a really, really tight window to land. And so we're coming in, flying into Ramstein, and I'm checking my watch religiously, and we are landing literally as roll call starts, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is not good. And then we land and park at literally the farthest away from the terminal that they could park us.
And well, Ramstein has a very big flight line, and their whole area is like a regular.
But put it this way, they had to bus us back to the terminal, and that took nearly 30 minutes just to bus. And so, we arrive, and when you arrive, the whole group goes in. You sit through a mass thing to get through, a mass sort of customs thing.
Right. They need to know if you have any cash, and if you have any
the do's and the don'ts, that
beef
sort of
turkey.
stuff. And then you go and you get your bag, and then you would get your bag, and then you would go sign in at the desk for your next flight. So I'm landing as roll call is going on. So So we get through that briefing, and we go downstairs into the baggage area and wait on my bag to come out. And I grabbed a technical sergeant at the time. I don't remember his name now. I did at that time because I sent a very nice thank you note to his supervisor and said, hey man, I'm trying to get back to Turkey. It's where I'm assigned. Because Space Aid from Germany, you could only go to Turkey if you were assigned to Turkey. You couldn't just say, hey, I want to go to Turkey. Why not? So you have to be assigned to Turkey. So once you got to Ramstein, it was generally pretty easy to get from Ramstein back to Germany. I mean, back to Turkey, because
you couldn't go there.
Right.
You
You're
didn't
only
have to
going
worry
there
about,
if you needed to.
Right. You don't have to worry about other people taking the
Right.
seats.
So I go and I say, hey, man, I am in a pickle. And so God bless this guy. He got on the radio and called the front desk and basically had him hold
Roll call?
well, hold the seat assignment.
Oh, okay.
Grabbed my bag, rushed me out, went and got me signed in, and made it on the plane. But literally, if it hadn't been for that technical sergeant,
Yeah.
I've been sitting in Ramstein for
Waiting
who knows how
a
long.
week because that rotator
Well,
runs
yeah,
every week.
absolutely, yeah. I've been there for a week.
So it would have been a week. But
So that was my closest call where I still made it, but man, I was worried.
And then we talked about what happens when you're not flying with your sponsor. And so we were stationed in Spain, and I had come back to the States to drop off the boys. And I was going to go back over to Spain and help Ron pack up everything, and we were going to move back here. And we were going to take a hop, a space available flight. Somebody commented and said, we used to call them hops. And I was like, we still call it hops. But so we were going to take a space safe flight. And so we had to drive. We were in Arkansas. We dropped the boys off and then drove to Virginia, to Norfolk Naval Station. Mm-hmm. It's a naval place, to catch the rotator out of there, or a flight that goes into, well, I don't even know where it was flying into. It must have gone into, it was going into Rota.
Yeah, it was good.
So naval station to naval station.
Right, so it was going Norfolk to Rota,
Right.
and then probably to Sigonella in Italy.
Right. And so I was just trying to hop on that part of it that went from Norfolk to Rota, which is not far from where we lived in Spain. That wasn't where we were stationed, but it was the closest flight line that we could fly out of. So anyway, we go there, we sign up, and then we just wait. And they're like, and we had multiple chances. There were at least 3 flights in 2 days that were going there. So I knew we could end up getting a hotel room on base. And so we were just waiting. And the first flight, they released 4 seats. And so it never made it to our category 4 where we were way down at the bottom. The next flight, they released 0 seats. So we loaded up our bags. We went back to the hotel, spent the night in the hotel, got up early the next morning, went back up there so we could be in line for roll call, ready to go. We spent probably 6 hours in that terminal that day. And here's what you're doing while you're waiting. Because they tell us, like, we have this flight coming in, the end. And sometimes they will tell you, it says up there, like, how many seats they think they might have.
It'll have, like, T20 or F20. F20
Right.
means they know firmly they've got 20 seats. T means tentative. So it could say
Right.
like T55 and then they go, nope, no seats at all.
Right, and actually, and this just said a question mark. So then we're sitting there like, okay, what do we do? Because here's the choice we have. We're in Norfolk, Virginia. I know you immediately start looking at all the bases that are within driving distance, and you think, what can get me to Europe at this point? Because anything that can get me at least across the pond will be closer to Spain, and then I can get my way somehow down to our house. So I'm trying to decide. The closest thing is all the way in Delaware at Dover. There's a flight going out of Dover, and it's going to get me close. I can't even remember. It might have been taking me to Italy, but it was going to get me over there some way. And so I thought, well, we could do that, but then they didn't have how many seats were going to be available, even tentatively. And I was like, that is a really long way to drive all the way to Delaware and then there not be anything. But back in Virginia, in 3 days, there was going to be one more chance. And so we made the plan to drive up to Maryland, where we had friends, stay with our friends for 3 days, which was an added bonus. We got to visit people, and then drive back down and try to get on the next one if we missed this flight. So that was our tentative plan. You're still looking at everything, though. You're trying to see what around around you is popping up, and you can only look 3 days in advance because, like we talked about last time, they can only put it out 72 hours. So we just keep updating and looking and see if any new flights are popping up, if anything's coming up, and we do not get on that flight either. So it's like, okay, let's go to Maryland. So we go up there, we visit our friends for 3 days, we come back down, and we try again, and we didn't get on it again. So we drove back to Arkansas and let him pack everything up
Yeah,
and move from Spain.
that was fun, especially with the 2 cats.
Right. Move from Spain all by himself. But it was either that or pay like thousands of dollars for a quick flight over there.
So what I've learned out of that, because that also happened in Turkey.
Well, though, in Turkey we chose not to go back.
That
was on purpose.
But we're done with that.
Yeah, he doesn't like moving by himself.
6 weeks out, if we're overseas trying to come back, no, you're not going home. Because that is no fun.
We thought it would just be easy, drop the boys off, move with just the 3 of us, and it would be easier to do it. And
Didn't work out that way.
It was not. It didn't work out that way, and it ended up being fine. But
Yeah.
we had to drive from Arkansas back to Virginia when he finally did land to pick up him and the cats, because that's where we thought we were going to be taking off from. So we thought our car was going to be there. It was a whole thing, and he had already gotten tickets to come there. And so anyway, that time it did not work out, and we tried multiple flights and didn't get on any of them. So that one didn't. And then one more story about Space A. We have multiple, so we've been trying to decide which ones to tell. But this one, again, we were stationed in Turkey. And like Ron said, it's not hard to get from Germany to Turkey, and it's not hard to get from Turkey to Germany, depending on when you come.
As long as you're not, we're homeschoolers. So we could go when we wanted to. Now, if you're trying to get out when school let out and
Right.
everybody's
Summertime is
Christmas,
hard.
summer,
Yeah.
it's really hard. But if you're flying just in off
Right.
times,
So
it's
we
pretty
would
easy.
always fly off times. It was the main reason why we decided to homeschool, is so we could travel anytime we wanted to, and we weren't stuck following the school schedule and having to do what they said. So anyway, it was May, and we were going to be going home to visit. And so we would, like we've already talked about, fly from Turkey to Germany, and then from Germany all the way down to Jackson, Mississippi. And we would take a medevac flight, where they were taking people. They weren't taking them to Jackson, they were dropping them off at Andrews, where the medical stuff is, and then they had an empty plane pretty much to take to Jackson. So we had decided to do this rotator thing that we wanted to do, which was to go from Turkey to Germany, then Germany to Jackson.
The medevac was what we normally tried to take. Now, this time I don't remember if it was that we couldn't get on the medevac, or we got there and this was going sooner or what. But
Right.
there was a C5 going from Ramstein to Memphis, Tennessee, which
With
is
no stops.
we have no stops. Which
Right,
distance
Jackson,
wise,
Mississippi and Memphis, Tennessee are about the same distance from
Yeah.
our house.
So C5, it's a little different than flying on a C-17. So in a C5, it's a huge cargo plane the Air Force has that both ends of it open up, so they can fit gigantic things in here. The passenger compartment is an actual passenger compartment
Yeah, with like real seats.
up at the top.
Right.
So you climb this ladder.
You have to climb a
probably
ladder.
20, 25 feet up in the air to get to the passenger
I was
compartment.
pretty freaked out because we had like a 2-year-old.
Yeah, he did all right. And you fly backwards.
Right. Which is
So-
another thing that's weird. And there aren't windows either, like it is in a...
No.
There were more.
There are 2 or 3.
Right, there's more than in a C-17, but they're not like everybody gets their own window like a regular plane. So, anyway, there are issues, but...
So we load up on the C5, and we get in there, and I think there were almost no people on that one. Now, when we went out,
There were people on, I mean, it wasn't as packed as
Right.
as the second time, but there were people on there because I remember somebody saying, like, try to sit in the middle. And
Yeah.
it wasn't very difficult for us to get middle-ish.
Right.
Now, we weren't right in the middle, but we were a little bit closer to the engine, but not...
And that's because if you're too far to the back, it's really hot.
Right.
If you're too far to the front, it's really cold, so you want to try to get in the middle. So we got on, but this is right as the volcano in Iceland
Iceland,
was
yeah.
erupting, which shut down travel for like 3 or 4 days,
Right.
and even commercial travel. So we got on, and they like rushed us on there.
They really did. And here's the funny thing about anytime you're doing this kind of travel, you know the whole spiel where they get on and they're like, and the exits are here, you know, and you need to do this stuff, and here's how you buckle your safety belts and all that. Here's how they do it. What is their job?
The load master.
The load master comes around, usually like individually, and he's like, your flotation devices are behind you. If you're in the jump seats, your flotation devices are behind you. The oxygen tanks are up there. They'll just point them out to you, and then they're like, we're good to go. We're like, yeah, we got it. And then they leave. So there's not any kind of standardized, like, here's what happens. And so at this point, this man, who we later found out is really ready to get home, is standing up at the front of this thing, and he's saying, here's where everything is. So he goes through it, and it's kind of like a commercial flight for this one because we're in like commercial looking seating. So our oxygen above our heads, and our life vests are below our seats. And he's pretending that he has a life vest. And he said, it freaked me out so bad because I'm still holding a 2-year-old. And he said, he said, do not inflate your life vest until you are outside of the plane, which they say that on a regular plane. They're just really nice about it. And what he said was, if you come up here to me and your thing is inflated, I will take this knife, deflate it, and push you out of the thing. And we were like, oh my gosh.
Don't mess with the load master.
I was so freaked out.
So we got on, and the pilots are like, all right, we got to go.
Yeah.
Because if we can get out, if we can get permission to take off, like now, we'll be able to go and
beat the ash.
And beat the ash, because it's the day before Mother's Day.
Right.
So we're gonna land on Mother's Day, and these are all pilots, and I think these were reservists.
They're reservists.
So they're trying to get home, and so we probably circled 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Around the tarmac.
Well, yeah, and dude said, we have 5 minutes. If we can get out in 5 minutes. And so we're all waiting, and 5 minutes passes, and we're like, oh. And they drove us right back over to the thing. And then he sounded like somebody had kicked his puppy. He was like, we have to get off the plane.
They won't let us depart.
He was so sad, and we were like, that's fine, we're in Germany.
Right.
Like, we did not care.
So for us it was fine. We spent 3 days hanging out.
We sure did. We hung out in Ramstein and had fun. Although we did run into him that night at the VX, or maybe the next day, and he said, my wife is so mad. We were like, well, I'm really sorry, but we're having fun in Ramstein. It did not go well for him.
But 3 days later, we got on the flight. It was much more full than it had been when we tried to get out before.
Right. And it did, and even that thing, while we did make it out, that messed with his leave. Like, we burned 4 days of leave, leaving Turkey, getting to Ramstein, and spending those 3 days there before we ever even got to the States. We had already used 3 days of leave. So
but it was all right.
It was fine, but I mean, you just have to keep those things in mind. You might get to one destination and then can't get to the next one.
Yep.
So you have to just be okay with wherever you end up and make the best of the situation.
So those are a few Space Age travel stories. I'm sure you have your own horror stories or amazing coincidences that worked out. We'd love to hear them down in the comment section.
Yeah, and not just Space Age travel, like any kind of travel stories we like to hear.
Yeah, we have stories on those too, but we won't go into those
We
today.
still have our favorite, but we're saving that.
Yeah.
So eventually, when we get further along in this series, we thought it would be fun to do a kids Q&A. And so our boys, they are 13 and 15, and they have both said that they would answer some questions if anybody has them about anything about the military and their life in the military and what it's been like for them. And I mean, we still reserve the right to be like, no, we're not talking about that. But if there's anything that you guys want to ask them.
Yeah, don't get weird out there.
Right. If there's anything that you guys want to ask them, don't hesitate. Put it down below, and we'll start filming that video as soon as we get some questions lined up that they would like to do.
So thanks for joining us for our stories about Space Age travel. New series will be coming out pretty soon, but come join us. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications.
Bye, guys.
See you later. Hi, Wanderers.
I'm Amanda. Okay, sorry. Sit up. Okay, good.